What if I told you that some of the greatest kingdoms of the ancient world never truly disappeared? They're still here, hidden beneath quiet hills, buried beneath layers of forgotten cities, waiting beneath the sands of ancient deserts, or resting beside rivers that have flowed for thousands of years. Tonight, we'll journey through forgotten capitals that once ruled powerful civilizations, mountain fortresses built above endless valleys, royal cities where kings and priests shaped history, sacred temples carved into stone, hidden desert kingdoms, and ancient settlements that continue to emerge from beneath the earth with every new archaeological discovery. These are not stories passed down through legend, excavated by archaeologists, studied for generations. Yet each one still holds mysteries that no excavation has completely solved. Before we begin, if you enjoy these ancient mysteries, I've spent months creating something special for you. It's called Ancient Sleep Secrets, a collection of 22 forgotten sleep rituals from Egypt, Sumer, the Maya, and the Norse. You can find it through the link in the description and pinned comment. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and together, let's travel across forgotten civilizations. The ancient city where archaeologists found a king's face made of jade. Deep beneath the dense rainforests of Belize, where towering trees hide ancient roads and tangled vines cover forgotten temples, an extraordinary face waited in complete darkness. Not carved from stone, not shaped from clay, but from jade. Brilliant green, carefully polished, piece by piece. It once rested upon the face of a Maya king, hidden inside a royal tomb, sealed for more than 1,000 years. When archaeologists finally uncovered it, they realized they were looking at one of the most remarkable royal discoveries ever made in the ancient Maya world. A face preserved not in flesh, but in precious stone. This is Carchemish, a lost city whose greatest treasure was the face of a forgotten king. Hidden deep within the Chiquibul forest, Carchemish was once the largest city in what is now Belize, covering more than 200 square kilometers at its height and supporting a population that may have exceeded 100,000 people during the height of the classic Maya civilization. Its temples rose above the jungle. Its roads stretched for kilometers. Its rulers commanded a powerful kingdom. The forest would eventually reclaim it all. For centuries, Carchemish remained almost invisible beneath the thick tropical canopy. The pyramids disappeared beneath trees. Courtyards filled with soil. Ancient causeways became hidden beneath tangled roots. The city did not vanish. It simply waited, patiently, for someone to find it again. Modern archaeological work began in the 1980s after local loggers reported unusual stone structures deep in the forest, leading researchers to uncover one of the largest and most sophisticated Maya cities ever discovered. Every excavation changed the map. Another temple emerged. Another palace appeared. The jungle slowly surrendered its secrets, one stone at a time. Carchemish was far more than a ceremonial center. It was the capital of a powerful kingdom that challenged neighboring Maya cities, winning remarkable military victories and controlling vast territories through trade, diplomacy, and carefully planned agriculture. Kings ruled from here. Scribes recorded history. Merchants crossed its roads. The city flourished. For centuries. Among Carchemish's greatest discoveries is the royal tomb believed to belong to King Cantu, one of the city's most successful rulers during the 7th century AD. The burial chamber was extraordinary, richly furnished, carefully sealed, prepared with immense respect. The king was not buried alone. He was surrounded by symbols of power. Then came the discovery that captured worldwide attention: a magnificent jade mosaic death mask. Hundreds of carefully shaped pieces of brilliant green jade assembled together to recreate the face of the deceased ruler with astonishing precision. Every fragment was placed deliberately, every contour carefully shaped. The face almost seemed alive. Even after 13 centuries, jade was among the most valuable materials in the Maya world, far more precious than gold. Its deep green color symbolized life, fertility, royal authority, and renewal. Only the highest members of society could possess objects of such extraordinary craftsmanship. This mask represented more than wealth. It represented kingship itself. Archaeologists also uncovered finely decorated pottery, carved shell ornaments, obsidian blades, jewelry, and ritual offerings surrounding the king, each object carefully positioned before the tomb was finally sealed. Nothing appears hurried. Every item carried meaning. Every placement reflected belief. The chamber became a final act of ceremony. One mystery continues to fascinate researchers. Why did the Maya create these remarkable jade masks? Some believe they helped transform the deceased ruler into a divine ancestor during the journey into the afterlife. Others think the mask symbolized rebirth, allowing the king to take on an eternal identity beyond death. A few suggest it represented both. The jade remains silent. Its meaning survives only through careful interpretation. Another question still lingers beneath the forest. Despite decades of excavation, only a small portion of Carchemish has been fully uncovered. Modern laser mapping has revealed thousands of hidden structures still concealed beneath the jungle canopy. Entire neighborhoods remain buried. Unknown temples still sleep beneath the trees. The city has not revealed everything. Not yet. Walking through Carchemish today feels like entering another world. Howler monkeys call from the forest above. Towering ceiba trees rise beside ancient pyramids. Stone stairways disappear into the jungle. The royal tomb lies empty now. The jade mask rests safely inside a museum. But the king's city remains exactly where he left it. Watching. Waiting. Hidden beneath the green canopy. Perhaps that is what makes Carchemish so extraordinary. Not simply the beautiful jade face discovered beneath its temples, but the realization that one of the greatest cities in the ancient Americas remained hidden beneath the forest for centuries, preserving the memory of a forgotten king whose face still looks back at us through carefully shaped pieces of green stone. The jungle remains. The pyramids endure. The king is gone. Yet his jade face continues to tell a story that history almost allowed the forest to keep forever. The tomb where every skeleton had a golden tongue. On Egypt's Mediterranean coast, where the sea meets endless stretches of pale desert, an ancient cemetery lay hidden beneath the sand for nearly 2,000 years. Its tombs were silent, its chambers sealed, its occupants long forgotten. When archaeologists finally opened the graves, they expected to find ordinary burials. Instead, they found something extraordinary. Skeleton after skeleton, each with a small piece of gold resting inside its mouth. Not jewelry, not treasure. A golden tongue, deliberately placed between the lips of the dead. A ritual repeated again and again. But why? This is Marina El Alamein, a forgotten necropolis where every voice was made of gold. More than 2,000 years ago, Marina El Alamein was a prosperous port city on Egypt's northern coast, flourishing during the Greek and Roman periods as merchants, sailors, and travelers crossed the Mediterranean between Alexandria and the wider Roman world. Ships arrived daily. Trade brought wealth. Cultures mixed freely. The city grew beside the sea. Beyond the busy streets stood an enormous cemetery filled with carefully constructed tombs carved into the soft limestone. Some belonged to wealthy families. Others were simpler, yet many followed the same mysterious custom. The dead were prepared with unusual care. One final object accompanied them into eternity. During recent excavations, archaeologists uncovered dozens of burials where thin gold foils had been carefully shaped into small tongues and placed inside the mouths of the deceased before the tombs were sealed. The discovery was unlike anything expected. One burial became 2, then 5, then dozens. The pattern was impossible to ignore. The ancient Egyptians believed that after death, the soul would stand before powerful gods in the afterlife. Some researchers believe the golden tongues were placed inside the mouth so the deceased could speak before Osiris, ruler of the underworld, during the final judgment. Others suggest the gold itself symbolized divine power and immortality. Perhaps it represented both. No ancient text explains the ritual completely. The dead kept their answer. Gold held profound significance in ancient Egyptian belief. Unlike ordinary metals, it did not rust or decay. Its brilliant color was associated with the flesh of the gods and with eternal existence beyond death. To place gold inside the mouth was more than decoration. It was an act of faith, a promise of another life. The tombs also contained beautifully painted coffins, pottery, glass vessels, jewelry, coins, amulets, and carefully arranged burial offerings, revealing that Marina El Alamein remained an important community where Egyptian traditions blended with Greek and Roman influences. 3 civilizations met here, their beliefs mixed together, creating customs unlike those found elsewhere. Archaeologists continue debating why the golden tongue ritual became so common in this cemetery while remaining relatively rare across much of Egypt. Was it a local religious tradition? A custom practiced by one community? Or evidence of beliefs that spread only along the Mediterranean coast? The evidence remains incomplete. The tombs offer clues, never certainty. Another mystery lies beneath the surrounding desert. Only part of the ancient necropolis has been excavated. Ground-penetrating surveys suggest many more tombs remain buried beneath layers of drifting sand, waiting to reveal whether the same remarkable practice continued for generations. The cemetery is far from finished. Its secrets remain underground. Walking through Marina El Alamein today feels strangely peaceful. The Mediterranean breeze drifts across the ancient ruins. Stone tomb entrances emerge quietly from the sand. The city above has long disappeared, but beneath the earth, countless voices still rest in silence, each prepared for a conversation that no living person would ever hear. Perhaps that is what makes Marina El Alamein so unforgettable. Not simply the discovery of golden tongues, but the quiet reminder that ancient people believed words carried power beyond death itself. When life ended, speech did not. The bodies returned to dust. The city faded into history. Yet the tiny pieces of gold remain, silent, patient, waiting inside forgotten tombs for the day someone finally asks why every voice was meant to speak forever. The city that was built on salt. Far beneath an ordinary Austrian mountain lies a world that should never have survived. Miles of tunnels disappear into complete darkness. Wooden staircases still stand after thousands of years. Ancient footprints remain pressed into the salt exactly where someone left them. Even tools abandoned by miners have been preserved almost perfectly, not because they were buried, but because the mountain itself refused to let them decay. This is Hallstatt, a place where salt became more valuable than gold, and where an entire civilization was built beneath the earth. Long before the Roman Empire, before the pyramids had become ancient monuments, people were already digging deep into the mountains above Hallstatt. Hidden within these peaks was one of Europe's richest deposits of rock salt. For prehistoric communities, salt was far more than a seasoning. It preserved meat through long winters, protected food from spoilage, allowed settlements to grow larger than ever before. Whoever controlled salt controlled survival. The earliest mining at Hallstatt began more than 7,000 years ago, making it one of the oldest known salt mines on Earth. Generation after generation returned to the same mountain, carving deeper tunnels with bronze picks, antler tools, wooden shovels, and incredible determination. Every meter underground represented countless hours of dangerous labor, yet they kept digging, because the reward was worth the risk. Over time, Hallstatt became astonishingly wealthy. The settlement above the mine expanded into an important trading center connected to distant parts of Europe. Salt from these mountains traveled hundreds of kilometers along ancient trade routes. In exchange came amber from the Baltic, bronze from Central Europe, and luxury goods from lands far beyond the Alps. This quiet mountain village became the center of an international economy long before written history reached the region. The true miracle, however, remained hidden underground. Unlike ordinary mines, Hallstatt possessed an extraordinary natural preservative: salt. Its dry, mineral-rich environment prevented bacteria from destroying organic materials that would normally disappear within decades. Wood survived, leather survived, rope survived. Even fragments of cloth remained intact after thousands of years. Few archaeological sites anywhere on Earth preserve ancient life so completely. Excavations have uncovered wooden ladders, mining torches, woven backpacks, work gloves, carrying sacks, and remarkably sophisticated tools that reveal how organized prehistoric mining had become. These were not isolated workers exploring caves. They belonged to a highly skilled industry, an industry operating centuries before most of Europe had developed cities. One of Hallstatt's greatest discoveries was the preserved body of an Iron Age miner found deep within the mountain during the 18th century. Although only parts of the remains survived, the discovery demonstrated just how perfectly the salt could preserve human tissue. The mountain had quietly protected its workers for centuries, almost as though time itself had stopped underground. The cemetery above Hallstatt tells another remarkable story. Archaeologists uncovered richly furnished graves containing finely crafted weapons, elaborate jewelry, imported goods, and luxury objects that reflected immense prosperity. The wealth generated by salt transformed an isolated alpine settlement into one of Europe's most influential prehistoric communities. So influential, in fact, that archaeologists named an entire period of European prehistory after it: the Hallstatt culture. Modern laser mapping continues to reveal tunnels that prehistoric miners excavated thousands of years ago. Some passages stretch deep into the mountain beyond areas that have been fully explored. Others remain inaccessible, sealed behind ancient collapses or untouched rock. Exactly how extensive the earliest mining network became is still unknown. The mountain has not revealed all of its secrets. Walking through Hallstatt today, visitors admire its wooden houses, quiet lake, and dramatic alpine scenery. Few realize that beneath every step lies another city entirely. A city built not with streets and buildings, but with tunnels. A hidden world where generations of miners spent their lives extracting the white mineral that changed European history. Perhaps that is Hallstatt's greatest mystery. The village above is beautiful, but the real city has always been below, hidden inside the mountain, protected by salt. Waiting patiently for archaeologists to uncover another tunnel, another forgotten tool, or another silent witness to one of humanity's oldest industries, the pyramid that was hidden in the desert. On the southern coast of Peru, where endless desert stretches toward distant mountains, enormous pyramids rise from the sand. They were never built from stone, never crowned with glittering temples. For centuries, the wind slowly buried them until they became almost invisible. Travelers walked past them. Explorers overlooked them. The desert quietly reclaimed an entire sacred city. When archaeologists finally uncovered its monuments, they realized they had found one of the largest ceremonial centers ever built in the ancient Americas. Not a city of kings, not a fortress, but a place where thousands gathered to worship beneath towering adobe pyramids. This is Raqchi, the hidden pyramid city of the Nazca civilization. Nearly 2,000 years ago, long before the Inca Empire emerged in the Andes, the Nazca people flourished along Peru's arid southern coast, transforming one of the driest landscapes on Earth into the center of a remarkable civilization. They built irrigation systems, created extraordinary ceramics, wove beautiful textiles, and carved the mysterious Nazca lines across the desert floor. Yet one place stood above all others: Raqchi. Unlike most ancient cities, Raqchi was not a permanent urban settlement filled with crowded neighborhoods and busy markets. Instead, archaeologists believe it functioned primarily as a vast ceremonial center where pilgrims traveled from across the Nazca world to participate in religious festivals, rituals, and seasonal gatherings. People came here, not to live, but to worship, to celebrate, to honor their gods. At its height, Raqchi covered more than 24 square kilometers and contained dozens of monumental adobe structures, including stepped pyramids, ceremonial plazas, temples, courtyards, and elevated platforms carefully arranged across the desert plain. The scale was astonishing, the construction immense. Everything built from earth, everything shaped by human hands. The largest pyramid rises more than 20 meters above the surrounding landscape, built from millions of carefully formed adobe bricks stacked layer upon layer over generations of construction. No stone was needed. The desert itself became the building material. The pyramid grew slowly, as each generation added another chapter. For centuries, drifting sand concealed much of Raqchi. The adobe walls blended naturally into the surrounding desert, making the ceremonial center almost disappear beneath wind-blown dunes. The city was never truly lost. It simply became part of the landscape, waiting, patiently, to be uncovered once again. Excavations have revealed beautifully painted pottery, finely woven textiles, ritual offerings, musical instruments, ceremonial staffs, and the remains of elaborate feasts that once brought thousands of pilgrims together beneath the desert sky. The ceremonies were grand, the gatherings unforgettable. The silence that followed lasted centuries. One of Raqchi's greatest mysteries is why such an enormous ceremonial center was eventually abandoned. Some researchers believe prolonged drought weakened the surrounding communities. Others suggest powerful earthquakes damaged the sacred buildings. A few think religious traditions simply changed over time. No written record survives. The desert offers no explanation, only silence. Another enduring question concerns the relationship between Raqchi and the famous Nazca lines. Many archaeologists believe pilgrims may have walked portions of the giant geoglyphs during religious ceremonies before gathering at the pyramids. Others argue the two sites served different purposes. The connection remains uncertain, yet both belong to the same extraordinary civilization. One visible from the sky, the other hidden beneath the sand. Modern excavations continue revealing new temples, plazas, and ceremonial platforms buried beneath layers of desert sediment, suggesting that large portions of Raqchi remain unexplored even today. Every season brings new discoveries: another staircase, another courtyard, another forgotten monument emerging from the dunes. The city has not finished telling its story. Walking through Karachi today feels unlike visiting almost any other archaeological site. The desert is almost completely silent. Wind moves gently across the adobe pyramids. Mountains stand on the distant horizon. There are no crowds, no towering stone walls, only earth rising from earth. The sacred city seems to belong to the landscape itself. Perhaps that is what makes Karachi so extraordinary, not simply its pyramids, or the thousands of pilgrims who once gathered there, but the realization that one of the greatest ceremonial cities in the ancient Americas disappeared not because it was destroyed, but because the desert slowly embraced it. The pilgrims are gone. The rituals have ended. The pyramids remain, waiting, silent. Half hidden beneath the sands of Peru, where one forgotten civilization still whispers beneath the endless desert sky, the seal that carried a name. In the ruins of ancient Jerusalem, where broken walls and shattered pottery emerge from layers of forgotten history, archaeologists discovered a piece of clay no larger than a coin. It looked insignificant, fragile, almost ordinary. Yet pressed into its tiny surface was a single name, a name written more than 26 centuries ago. Not the name of a king, not a famous conqueror, but a real person. Someone who once held this seal in his own hand. Someone who lived, worked, and vanished long before history remembered him. This tiny object carried his identity across the centuries. This is the bulla of Yediah, son of Alacahöyük, a broken seal that preserved one forgotten life. More than 2,600 years ago, Jerusalem stood at the heart of the Kingdom of Judah, a growing city surrounded by massive defensive walls, busy markets, royal officials, scribes, priests, and ordinary families living beneath the shadow of the first temple. Messages arrived daily. Taxes were collected. Contracts were written. Government depended upon records, and records needed seals. In the ancient Near East, important documents were often rolled into scrolls and tied with string before a small lump of wet clay was pressed over the knot. The owner then stamped the clay using a carved seal. When the clay hardened, the document became officially sealed, untouched, authenticated, protected. The clay impression became known as a bulla. Most bullae were never meant to survive. Once a document was opened, the clay seal was usually broken and discarded. Thousands disappeared forever. Only unusual circumstances preserved the few archaeologists find today. Often disaster, often fire, sometimes complete destruction. History preserved them by accident. During excavations in Jerusalem, archaeologists uncovered one such bulla bearing a beautifully impressed ancient Hebrew inscription reading, belonging to Yediah, son of Alacahöyük. Just a few words. One name. One family. Yet suddenly, someone forgotten for more than 2.5 millennia became real again. The discovery offers an intimate glimpse into daily life during the late Kingdom of Judah, shortly before the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem in 586 BC. Yediah may have been a royal official, a government administrator, a merchant, or perhaps a scribe responsible for managing important records. His exact role remains unknown. Only his name survives, patiently waiting in clay. The bulla itself is remarkably detailed. The carefully impressed Hebrew letters remain sharp despite their great age. Even the fingerprints left in the clay during its creation have survived on some ancient bullae from Jerusalem, reminding archaeologists that these objects were once held by real human hands. Hands that worked, hands that wrote, hands now long gone. One enduring mystery surrounds Yediah himself. Who was he? No surviving historical text tells his story. No palace inscription records his achievements. His entire identity rests upon one small lump of fired clay discovered beneath the ruins of an ancient city. Sometimes history speaks loudly. Sometimes it whispers. Researchers also continue debating exactly where the bulla was originally used. Some believe it sealed official government correspondence. Others suggest private legal documents or commercial transactions. A few think it may have belonged to an administrative archive destroyed during Jerusalem's final days before the Babylonian invasion. The evidence allows possibilities, not certainty. The seal keeps its silence. The destruction of Jerusalem unexpectedly became the reason the bulla survived. When Babylonian armies burned the city, intense heat accidentally fired the soft clay, transforming it into a durable ceramic object capable of surviving thousands of years beneath the earth. A city was destroyed. A name was preserved. History often works in unexpected ways. Walking through ancient Jerusalem today, it is easy to admire its massive walls, monumental buildings, and sacred places. Yet sometimes the smallest discoveries tell the most personal stories. Not a palace, not a temple, only a seal no larger than a thumb, carrying the name of someone history almost forgot. Perhaps that is what makes the bulla of Yediah, son of Asaiahu, so remarkable. Not because it belonged to a famous ruler. History remembers many kings. But because it reminds us that ancient cities were built by ordinary people whose names rarely appear in books. His house disappeared. His documents turned to dust. His world came to an end. Yet one tiny seal remained, waiting, silent, preserving the name of a man who reached across 26 centuries with nothing more than a fingerprint and a single impression in clay. The royal tomb that contained a bed made of bronze. Beneath a quiet hill in central Türkiye, hidden inside one of the largest burial mounds of the ancient world, archaeologists entered a chamber that no one had seen for nearly 3,000 years. The air was still. The wooden walls remained standing. Furniture waited exactly where it had been placed. And at the center of the chamber stood something almost unimaginable. A royal bed, not carved from wood, not decorated with gold, but built from bronze. It had carried the body of one of the ancient world's most powerful rulers into eternity. This was no ordinary burial. It was a royal tomb sealed so perfectly that time itself seemed to stop inside. This is Tumulus MM at Gordian, the greatest tomb ever discovered in ancient Phrygia. Nearly 28 centuries ago, Gordian stood as the capital of the Phrygian kingdom, a wealthy and influential civilization that controlled much of central Anatolia through trade, agriculture, and powerful royal dynasties. Its roads connected kingdoms. Its markets welcomed merchants from distant lands. Its kings ruled from impressive palaces. Among them, one name would become legendary: King Midas. For generations, people believed the enormous burial mound rising above the landscape concealed the tomb of the famous King Midas himself. The mound dominates the countryside even today, standing more than 50 meters high and visible from many kilometers away. It was built to be remembered, to proclaim royal power long after death. Its message still survives. When archaeologists excavated the mound in the 1950s, they discovered an extraordinary wooden burial chamber hidden deep inside its center. Unlike many ancient royal tombs, it had escaped looting. Everything remained almost exactly where mourners had left it. The chamber became one of the best preserved royal burials ever found from the Iron Age. At its center rested the body of an elderly man laid upon an elaborate bronze bed, surrounded by beautifully crafted wooden furniture, ceremonial tables, bronze vessels, and luxurious textiles that had astonishingly survived beneath the mound. The bronze frame gleamed even after centuries underground. It was built not simply for comfort, but for eternity. A final resting place worthy of a king. Researchers now believe the tomb probably belonged not to King Midas himself, but to his father, King Gordius, or another senior member of the royal family who ruled shortly before Midas became famous throughout the ancient world. The identity remains uncertain. The wealth is undeniable. The mystery continues. One of the tomb's greatest discoveries was an enormous funerary banquet preserved inside the chamber. Bronze cauldrons, bowls, drinking cups, and serving vessels still contained traces of the final meal shared before the tomb was sealed. Modern scientific analysis has even revealed parts of the ancient menu: barley, lentils, goat meat, and a fermented alcoholic drink made from grapes, barley, and honey. For a brief moment, archaeologists could almost taste the farewell feast held nearly 3,000 years ago. The wooden furniture inside the chamber also amazed researchers. Finely crafted tables, stools, and decorative objects survived because the burial mound created an unusually stable environment that protected organic materials rarely preserved at other archaeological sites. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Every joint carefully fitted, every surface precisely finished. Nothing had been placed there by chance. Another enduring mystery surrounds the construction of the mound itself. Moving hundreds of thousands of tons of earth without modern machinery required an immense workforce and careful organization. Exactly how long the project took remains unknown, but the result transformed the landscape forever. The king's monument became a mountain. Walking through Gordian today, visitors see only a grassy hill rising above the Anatolian plain. Few realize that beneath it lies one of the ancient world's most remarkable royal burials. The wooden chamber still survives. The bronze bed remains. The banquet has long ended. Yet the silence inside the tomb feels almost untouched, as though its royal occupant has only just fallen asleep. Perhaps that is what makes Tumulus MM so extraordinary. Not simply its enormous size, or the magnificent bronze bed discovered within, but the realization that an entire royal farewell was preserved almost exactly as it happened nearly 3,000 years ago. The mourners departed. The entrance was sealed. The kingdom faded into history. Yet beneath one quiet hill in Türkiye, a forgotten king still rests upon his bronze bed, waiting, silent, guarded by the earth that has protected his final chamber for almost 3 millennia, the ancient city where every house had its own shrine. Long before temples dominated city skylines, before kings built towering palaces, before priests gathered crowds beneath massive stone monuments, there was a city where nearly every family worshipped inside their own home. No grand sanctuaries, no towering pyramids, no central temple. Instead, every house could become a sacred place, its walls covered with mysterious paintings, its rooms filled with hidden burials, its shrines decorated with the horns of wild bulls. For thousands of years, generations lived, prayed, celebrated, and buried their loved ones beneath the very floors they walked across every day. This is Alacahöyük, one of humanity's oldest cities, and perhaps the world's first neighborhood of household shrines. Around 7,400 BC, while much of humanity still lived as scattered farming communities, a remarkable settlement began to grow across the Konya Plain in central Türkiye. It expanded steadily for nearly 2,000 years. At its height, thousands of people lived together inside tightly packed mud brick homes that stretched across the landscape without streets or open squares. Instead of walking between houses, residents climbed ladders onto flat rooftops and traveled from roof to roof before descending through openings in the ceilings into their homes. The rooftops became the city's streets. This unusual design protected the settlement while making efficient use of every available space. Homes shared walls with one another, forming an enormous honeycomb of connected buildings. From above, the city would have appeared almost like one continuous structure. There were no obvious public buildings separating ordinary families from elites. Everyone lived remarkably close together. Yet archaeologists soon discovered something even more surprising hidden inside those ordinary-looking homes. Many contained elaborate shrines. Their walls were covered with red ochre paintings depicting hunting scenes, geometric designs, leopards, vultures, and mysterious human figures. Some walls displayed carefully arranged bullhorns embedded directly into the plaster. Others held sculpted reliefs of animals emerging from the walls themselves. These were not simple decorations. They appear to have held deep symbolic meaning. Unlike later civilizations that built massive temples for public worship, Alacahöyük seems to have practiced religion within individual households. Each family maintained its own sacred space. Ceremonies likely unfolded beside cooking fires, sleeping platforms, and daily household activities. Religion was woven directly into ordinary life. The home itself became the temple. One of the settlement's most remarkable customs involved the dead. When family members passed away, they were often buried beneath the floors of their own houses, sometimes directly beneath sleeping platforms, sometimes beneath living areas where future generations continued their daily lives. Over time, homes accumulated multiple burials beneath their floors. Ancestors remained physically present inside the household long after death. Archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of these burials. Many skeletons show careful positioning. Some individuals appear wrapped in woven textiles or mats before burial. Children and adults rested together beneath the same rooms where families cooked meals, shared stories, and welcomed new generations. Death and daily life existed side by side. Even more mysterious are the plastered human skulls discovered at the site. After some individuals had decomposed, their skulls were removed from the graves. Several were carefully coated with plaster, reshaped to resemble living faces, and sometimes painted with red pigment. Why these particular ancestors received such treatment remains unknown. Some researchers believe they honored respected family members. Others suggest ancestor worship played a central role in household rituals. No one knows for certain. Among the city's most famous discoveries is a remarkable wall painting that may represent one of humanity's earliest maps. It appears to show rows of houses with a twin-peaked volcano rising behind them. Some researchers believe the volcano is nearby Hassan Dağ, possibly depicting an ancient volcanic eruption witnessed by the people of Alacahöyük. Others argue the painting is symbolic rather than geographic. The debate continues today. Equally fascinating is what archaeologists did not find. There is little evidence of kings, no royal palaces, no monumental tombs, no obvious signs of powerful rulers controlling the settlement. For nearly 2,000 years, this enormous community appears to have functioned with an unusually equal social structure compared with many later civilizations. Exactly how such a large population maintained order without clear political hierarchy remains one of archaeology's greatest puzzles. Today, only low earthen mounds rise above the Turkish plain. The mud brick walls have long since collapsed. The rooftops where thousands once walked have disappeared beneath layers of time. Yet beneath those layers, the homes remain. The painted shrines survive. The bullhorns still emerge from ancient plaster. And beneath the floors, entire generations continue to rest exactly where their families placed them nearly 9,000 years ago. Perhaps that is what makes Alacahöyük unlike any other ancient city on Earth. It reminds us that humanity's earliest sacred spaces were not towering temples built for crowds. They were humble homes, places where families gathered around the fire, where children grew into adults, where ancestors never truly left, and where every doorway may have led not only into a house, but into a shrine. The palace that hid a room full of elephant tusks. On the island of Crete, beneath the ruins of one of Europe's oldest palaces, archaeologists opened a room unlike any they had expected to find. The walls had collapsed. The roof had long disappeared. Dust covered everything, but scattered across the floor were hundreds of pale, curved fragments. At first, they looked like broken pieces of stone. They weren't. They were elephant tusks. Ivory. Imported from lands hundreds, perhaps thousands, of kilometers away. Enough to fill an entire chamber. Who brought them here? And why would a Bronze Age palace store one of the ancient world's most valuable materials in a single hidden room? This is Knossos, the legendary palace where a forgotten treasure of ivory lay buried for more than 3,000 years. Nearly 4,000 years ago, Knossos stood at the heart of the Minoan civilization, a maritime power that dominated much of the eastern Mediterranean through trade, craftsmanship, and one of the ancient world's most sophisticated economies. Its fleets crossed the sea. Its merchants reached distant kingdoms. Its influence spread far beyond Crete. The palace became the center of it all. Unlike the heavily fortified palaces of later civilizations, Knossos was built as a sprawling complex of courtyards, ceremonial halls, workshops, storerooms, staircases, and living quarters surrounding a vast central court. Thousands of people worked here every day. Officials kept records. Artisans produced luxury goods. Messengers arrived from overseas. The palace never stood still. Archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of storage magazines lined with enormous clay jars capable of holding olive oil, wine, grain, and other valuable supplies. But among these storerooms, one discovery stood apart from all the others: a chamber filled with ivory. Not finished carvings, not luxury ornaments. Raw elephant tusks waiting to be transformed by skilled craftsmen. Many of the tusks had been carefully cut into manageable sections before being stored, suggesting they formed part of an organized workshop dedicated to producing some of the finest luxury objects in the Minoan world. Nothing appears accidental. Every piece had value. Every fragment represented wealth. The room was a treasury of craftsmanship waiting to happen. Ivory was one of the most prized materials of the Bronze Age. There were no elephants on Crete. Every tusk had traveled across the Mediterranean through vast trade networks linking the Minoans with Egypt, the Levant, and perhaps even regions farther south where African elephants still roamed. The journey was extraordinary, the cost immense. Only a wealthy kingdom could afford such imports. Excavations throughout Knossos have revealed beautifully carved ivory figurines, decorative furniture inlays, ceremonial boxes, weapon handles, jewelry, and religious objects, demonstrating the remarkable skill of Minoan artisans. Each carving required patience, precision, years of experience. The palace attracted the finest craftsmen of its age. One mystery continues to fascinate archaeologists. Why was so much raw ivory stored in one location? Some researchers believe the palace controlled the entire luxury trade, distributing ivory to royal workshops throughout Crete. Others suggest the room functioned as a secure warehouse awaiting future deliveries to elite artisans. The evidence supports both possibilities. The palace offers no final answer. Another question concerns the palace's dramatic destruction around 1450 BC. Whether caused by invasion, internal conflict, earthquakes, or a combination of disasters, Knossos eventually fell into decline. The ivory remained behind. The craftsmen never returned. The storeroom was sealed beneath collapsed walls, waiting for thousands of years. Modern excavations continue revealing new sections of the enormous palace complex. Fresh storerooms, hidden corridors, workshops, shrines. Many researchers believe significant portions of ancient Knossos still remain buried beneath later construction and unexcavated ground. The palace has not finished revealing its secrets. Walking through Knossos today is unlike visiting almost any other Bronze Age site. Colorful frescoes have been carefully restored. Stone staircases still climb through multiple levels. Sunlight fills the central court. Yet somewhere beneath those ancient halls once rested a room overflowing with elephant ivory brought across distant seas by merchants whose names have been forgotten. Perhaps that is what makes Knossos so remarkable. Not simply its legendary palace, or the myths of King Minos and the Minotaur, but the quiet evidence that nearly 4,000 years ago, this island kingdom stood at the center of a trading world that stretched across continents. The ships are gone. The merchants have vanished. The elephants lived far away. Yet beneath the palace of Knossos, their ivory remained. Silent, patient, waiting to reveal just how connected the ancient world had already become long before history began to write it down. The fortress where hundreds of arrowheads were frozen in battle. High above the Dead Sea, on a lonely plateau surrounded by sheer cliffs, an ancient fortress rises from the desert. Its walls still stand. Its storehouses remain intact. Its towers overlook the wilderness exactly as they did 2,000 years ago. From a distance, it seems peaceful, untouched. But scattered across its stone pathways, buried beneath collapsed walls, and embedded in the earth, archaeologists uncovered hundreds of iron arrowheads, not stored in an armory, not abandoned by soldiers after training. These arrows were fired in battle. They fell where they struck, and they never moved again. The final moments of one of history's greatest sieges remained frozen in the desert. This is Masada, the mountain fortress where the evidence of war still lies exactly where it fell. Rising more than 400 meters above the surrounding landscape, Masada occupies one of the most naturally defensible locations in the ancient world. Steep cliffs surround the plateau on nearly every side. Only narrow paths reach the summit. From above, defenders could see approaching enemies long before they arrived. It was a fortress built to resist almost anything. During the 1st century BC, King Herod the Great transformed Masada into an extraordinary royal refuge. He built magnificent palaces, enormous warehouses, bathhouses, water reservoirs, defensive towers, and thick stone walls capable of sustaining hundreds of people during a prolonged siege. Every detail was planned: food, water, protection. The mountain became nearly impossible to conquer. Everything changed during the First Jewish-Roman War. Around AD 73, after Jerusalem had fallen to Roman forces, a group of Jewish rebels made their final stand at Masada, refusing to surrender despite being surrounded by one of the most powerful armies in the world. The fortress became their last refuge. The Romans surrounded it completely. The siege had begun. The Roman army established a ring of camps around the mountain and constructed an enormous siege ramp using thousands of tons of earth and stone, allowing soldiers to push siege engines toward the fortress walls. Even today, the ramp remains visible, a permanent scar across the desert, proof of Rome's determination. When archaeologists excavated Masada, they uncovered remarkable evidence of that final battle. Hundreds of iron arrowheads lay scattered across the fortress and near the defensive walls. Many belonged to Roman archers. Others matched the weapons used by the defenders. Together, they formed a silent map of the fighting. Each arrow marked a desperate moment. Each one remained exactly where it landed. Alongside the arrowheads, excavators discovered ballista stones fired from Roman war machines, fragments of weapons, armor, and damaged fortifications, revealing the extraordinary intensity of the siege that unfolded nearly 2,000 years ago. The battlefield had never truly disappeared. The desert simply preserved it, patiently, waiting beneath the sand. Ancient historian Flavius Josephus wrote that when Roman soldiers finally entered the fortress, they found hundreds of defenders dead, having chosen death over capture. Whether every detail of his account is historically accurate remains the subject of ongoing debate. Archaeology confirms the siege, the final moments, however, remain less certain. History remembers. The evidence questions. One mystery continues to fascinate researchers. Excavations uncovered only a small number of human remains compared with the hundreds described in ancient texts. Were many bodies removed? Did later events disturb the site? Or did Josephus exaggerate aspects of the story? The fortress offers clues, not complete answers. Its silence remains. Walking across Masada today is a powerful experience. The desert stretches endlessly below. The Roman camps remain visible across the landscape. The siege ramp still climbs toward the summit. The fortress walls continue watching over the Dead Sea. And beneath every step lies the evidence of one of antiquity's most famous last stands. The battle ended long ago. The arrowheads remained. Perhaps that is what makes Masada so unforgettable. Not simply its towering cliffs, or the remarkable fortress built upon them, but the realization that thousands of years later, the battlefield still exists almost exactly where history left it. The soldiers are gone. The siege engines have vanished. The voices have fallen silent. Yet the iron arrowheads still rest beneath the desert sun, waiting, patiently, marking the place where an ancient battle was frozen in time, one arrow at a time. The forgotten fortress where every wall was blackened by fire. On a windswept island off the southern coast of Sweden stands a circular stone fortress unlike any other in northern Europe. Its walls are silent. Its gates remain open. Its homes have been rebuilt. But beneath the ground, archaeologists uncovered a haunting detail that changed the story of the entire settlement. Nearly every wall carried the same dark scars: blackened stone, burned timber, layers of ash. Room after room showed evidence of intense fire. This was no accidental blaze. Something terrible happened here. An entire community watched its fortress burn. This is Ekatorp, the Iron Age stronghold where fire left its mark on every wall. More than 1,500 years ago, the island of Öland occupied an important position in the Baltic Sea, where trade routes connected Scandinavia with northern Europe and distant Roman territories. Merchants crossed these waters. Warriors defended them. Communities built strongholds to survive uncertain times. Among the greatest was Ekatorp. Unlike many hilltop fortresses, Ekatorp was built as a perfectly circular enclosure of limestone walls surrounding tightly packed wooden houses, workshops, storage buildings, wells, and open gathering spaces. The stone wall enclosed an entire village. Families lived inside its protection. Children grew up behind its gates. It was more than a fortress. It was a home. Archaeologists have shown that Ekatorp was occupied during several different periods of the Iron Age and early medieval era. Each generation repaired old walls, built new houses, and adapted the settlement to changing threats. The fortress evolved through centuries of Scandinavian history. Yet every phase eventually met the same fate: fire. During excavation, researchers discovered thick layers of charcoal, collapsed roof beams, burned clay, and blackened stones spread across much of the fortress. Many buildings had clearly burned where they stood. Some walls still carried visible traces of intense heat. The destruction was widespread, too extensive to ignore. One possibility is that hostile raiders attacked the settlement during periods of regional conflict, setting homes ablaze after breaching the walls. Another suggests the fortress may have been deliberately destroyed during political struggles between rival communities. Others believe repeated accidental fires in tightly packed wooden buildings could explain at least some of the evidence. No written record survives. The burned walls remain the only witnesses. Excavations also uncovered thousands of everyday objects left behind by the people who once lived inside the fortress. Iron knives, bone combs, jewelry, spinning tools, weapons, animal bones, even gaming pieces used during quiet evenings long before disaster arrived. These were ordinary lives, interrupted by extraordinary events. Unlike many Scandinavian settlements, Ekatorp offers archaeologists an unusually complete picture of daily life inside a fortified Iron Age community. The arrangement of houses, workshops, livestock pens, and defensive walls reveals how families balanced farming, craftsmanship, trade, and military preparedness within a single enclosed settlement. Every building had a purpose. Every space was carefully planned. Nothing was wasted. One enduring mystery concerns why the fortress was rebuilt after earlier destruction. Again and again, new generations returned to the same location despite evidence that previous settlements had burned. Perhaps the position was too valuable to abandon. Perhaps memory tied people to the place, or perhaps rebuilding became its own tradition. The answer has been lost. Today, Ekatorp has been carefully reconstructed using archaeological evidence, allowing visitors to walk through wooden houses, workshops, and gates that closely resemble the original Iron Age fortress. Yet beneath these reconstructed buildings lies the authentic archaeological record. The ash remains. The burned foundations remain. The scars beneath the earth have never disappeared. Perhaps that is what makes Ekatorp so remarkable. Not simply its impressive circular walls, or its role as one of Scandinavia's best-preserved Iron Age fortresses, but the quiet evidence that an entire community endured repeated destruction and continued to rebuild where others might have walked away forever. The fires eventually faded. The smoke disappeared. The people were forgotten. Yet the blackened stones still remember. Silent, patient, waiting inside the ancient fortress where every wall tells the story of a fire that history never fully explained. The temple that preserved thousands of broken clay figurines. On the northern coast of Cyprus, beneath the ruins of an ancient sanctuary, archaeologists uncovered a room unlike anything they had ever seen. The floor wasn't covered with pottery or broken stone. It was buried beneath thousands of shattered clay figures. Heads, arms, legs, horses, warriors, priests, bulls. Everywhere they looked, fragments emerged from the earth. At first, it seemed as though someone had deliberately destroyed an entire army. But these weren't soldiers. They were offerings, left inside a sacred temple more than 27 centuries ago. This is Aya Arini, the forgotten sanctuary where thousands of broken clay figures waited in silence. More than 3,000 years ago, Cyprus stood at the crossroads of the eastern Mediterranean, connecting Egypt, Anatolia, the Levant, and the Aegean world through busy maritime trade routes. Copper flowed from the island. Merchants crossed its harbors. Ideas traveled with every ship. Religions mixed. Cultures blended. And among its sacred places, Aya Arini became one of the most remarkable. Unlike a royal palace or fortified city, Aya Arini served primarily as a religious sanctuary where generations of worshippers gathered to present offerings to their gods. The temple was not built to display political power. It existed for devotion. Pilgrims arrived. Prayers were spoken. Gifts were left behind, century after century. When archaeologists began excavating the sanctuary during the 20th century, they expected to uncover a handful of ceremonial objects. Instead, they encountered one of the largest collections of terracotta votive figures ever discovered in the Mediterranean. Thousands of them, many standing nearly life-sized, others only a few centimeters tall, some perfectly preserved, many deliberately broken. The sheer scale of the discovery was astonishing. The figures represented an extraordinary variety of subjects. Warriors carrying shields and spears, horsemen mounted on carefully sculpted horses, priests wearing elaborate robes, musicians, animals, chariots, and mysterious human figures whose identities remain uncertain. Together, they created what archaeologists often describe as a silent clay procession frozen inside the sanctuary. Each figurine had been carefully molded, shaped, and fired before being carried to the temple as a personal offering. Some were simple. Others displayed remarkable craftsmanship, with painted details, intricate hairstyles, armor, and expressive faces still visible after thousands of years. Every figure represented someone's act of faith, someone's prayer, someone's hope. One of the sanctuary's greatest mysteries is why so many of the figurines were broken. Some researchers believe they were intentionally smashed during religious ceremonies before being placed inside sacred deposits. Others suggest they collapsed naturally after the temple fell into ruin. A few propose that changing religious traditions led worshippers to respectfully bury older offerings rather than discard them. No ancient inscription explains what happened. The fragments remain silent. Unlike the famous terracotta army of China, these figures were never created for a single ruler or one grand burial. Instead, they accumulated slowly across generations. Every visitor added another offering, another prayer, another small piece of the sanctuary's growing collection. By the time the temple was abandoned, thousands of clay figures stood together inside its sacred space. Excavations also uncovered altars, pottery, ash deposits, animal bones, and ritual objects, revealing that sacrifices, feasting, and ceremonial gatherings formed an important part of life at Aya Arini. The sanctuary was never empty. It echoed with voices. Smoke from offerings drifted into the sky. The clay figures watched silently from every corner. Today, many of these remarkable terracotta sculptures are displayed together much as archaeologists believe they originally stood. Seen as a group, they create an unforgettable sight. Hundreds of ancient faces stare quietly forward. Rows of warriors stand beside horses. Priests remain frozen in prayer. The temple may have disappeared. Its congregation never truly left. Perhaps that is what makes Aya Irini so extraordinary. Not simply the thousands of clay figurines uncovered beneath its ruins, but the realization that each one was made by different hands, given by different people. Across hundreds of years, alone, they are beautiful. Together, they become something far greater, a silent record of an ancient community's faith, waiting patiently. Inside the forgotten temple, where thousands of broken figures still stand together, even after nearly 3 millennia. The lost city that reconnected an ancient civilization. High above the dry valleys of coastal Peru, where dusty hills rise beneath an endless blue sky, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a city no one expected to find. Its stone stairways still climbed ancient platforms. Circular plazas emerged from beneath centuries of sand. Temple walls stretched across the hillside. Everything suggested this had once been an important place. But the greatest surprise wasn't the city itself. It was what the city revealed. This forgotten settlement helped reconnect one of the oldest civilizations in the Americas after centuries of decline. A missing chapter in human history had been waiting beneath the earth. This is Peñuco, the newly uncovered city that changed what archaeologists thought they knew about ancient Peru. Nearly 5,000 years ago, the nearby city of Caral flourished as the center of one of the world's earliest civilizations, rising centuries before the Egyptian pyramids reached their greatest heights. Its people built monumental pyramids, organized thriving communities, developed long-distance trade. Yet unlike many ancient civilizations, they left no known writing. Their history survived through architecture and silence. For generations, archaeologists believed that after Caral declined, much of the surrounding region gradually lost its importance. But recent excavations at Peñuco have begun telling a very different story. Rather than disappearing completely, the traditions of the Caral civilization may have continued through new settlements hidden farther inland. Peñuco became one of the strongest pieces of that puzzle. Located strategically between the Pacific coast, the Andes Mountains, and the Amazon basin, Peñuco occupied an ideal position for trade. Merchants could exchange goods from dramatically different environments. Marine shells arrived from the ocean. Stone, plants, and minerals came from the mountains. Exotic products traveled from the eastern forests. The city stood at the crossroads of 3 worlds. Archaeological excavations have uncovered impressive stone buildings, ceremonial platforms, public plazas, staircases, storage areas, and carefully planned architecture that reveal a highly organized community with remarkable engineering skills. Nothing appears random. Every structure follows a thoughtful design. The builders understood planning, long before written records. Researchers believe Peñuco served as an important ceremonial and commercial center where religious gatherings, trade, and political leadership came together in one carefully planned settlement. People traveled here, not only to exchange goods, but to exchange ideas, traditions, beliefs. The city connected entire regions. Among the discoveries are carefully carved stone sculptures, ritual objects, ceremonial spaces, and beautifully crafted artifacts that reflect cultural traditions closely linked to the ancient Caral civilization. These similarities suggest that knowledge, architecture, and religious practices continued long after Caral's political influence faded. The civilization evolved. It did not simply disappear. One of the most remarkable aspects of Peñuco is its age. Dating suggests the city flourished roughly 3,500 years ago, during a period when many researchers believed this region had entered a decline. Instead, Peñuco reveals resilience, adaptation, a civilization finding new ways to survive. History became far more complex than once imagined. The city's discovery is closely associated with decades of research led by archaeologist Ruth Shady, whose work first brought the ancient civilization of Caral to worldwide attention. Her team's continued investigations are gradually revealing that many important settlements connected to this remarkable culture still remain hidden beneath Peru's valleys. Every excavation changes the map. Another city appears. Another forgotten chapter returns. Much of Peñuco remains unexcavated. Large sections still lie beneath layers of earth and stone, waiting for archaeologists to uncover temples, homes, workshops, and public buildings that may completely reshape our understanding of early civilization in South America. The city has only begun to speak. Most of its story still sleeps beneath the ground. Walking through Peñico today, the surrounding landscape feels quiet. Dry hills stretch toward the horizon. Ancient terraces blend into the mountains. Only scattered stone walls hint at the remarkable city that once stood here. No crowds fill its plazas. No merchants cross its streets. Yet beneath the Peruvian sun, the forgotten city continues to reveal a civilization that refused to vanish. Perhaps that is what makes Peñico so extraordinary. Not simply that it is an ancient city. History is filled with ancient cities, but that it bridges a gap scholars believed had been lost forever. A missing connection between one of humanity's earliest civilizations and the generations that followed. The builders are gone. The temples have fallen. The trade routes have faded. Yet beneath the valleys of Peru, Peñico still waits. Silent, patient, keeping alive the story of a civilization that never truly disappeared. The fortress hidden between two desert cliffs. In the eastern desert of Jordan, where empty plains stretch toward the horizon, an ancient fortress rises from the stone as though it has always belonged there. At first glance, it seems isolated, forgotten, surrounded by silence. But look closer. It sits between two rocky ridges that once guarded every approach. A perfect place to control the desert. A perfect place to watch the roads. And hidden within its thick walls, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a palace, a mosque, churches, workshops, and traces of civilizations that rebuilt the same fortress again and again. This was never just a lonely castle. It was a crossroads of empires. This is Qasr al-Halabat, the desert fortress that stood watch between the cliffs for nearly 2,000 years. Long before the fortress we see today was built, this lonely corner of Jordan formed part of the eastern frontier of the Roman Empire. The surrounding desert was crossed by merchants, soldiers, pilgrims, and nomadic tribes traveling between Syria, Arabia, and the fertile lands farther west. Whoever controlled these routes controlled commerce itself. The Romans understood that well. During the 4th century AD, they constructed a fortified outpost here to protect the frontier and monitor movement across the desert. Built from massive limestone blocks, the fortress became one link in a network of defensive forts stretching across the empire's eastern boundary. Its soldiers watched constantly, not only for invading armies, but for opportunity. Every traveler who passed carried news, goods, or wealth. Centuries later, after the rise of the Umayyad Caliphate, the old Roman fort was transformed into something entirely different. Its military role gradually gave way to royal comfort. New buildings rose inside the walls. Elegant courtyards appeared. Reception halls were decorated with carved stone. Colorful mosaics covered the floors. The fortress became a desert palace. Excavations have revealed beautifully carved limestone panels decorated with vines, animals, birds, and intricate geometric patterns, reflecting a remarkable blend of Roman, Byzantine, and early Islamic artistic traditions. Every carving tells the story of cultures meeting, not replacing one another, but building upon what came before. One of the site's greatest surprises came from the discovery of multiple religious buildings within the same complex. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of 2 Byzantine churches beneath later structures, while nearby stood an early Islamic mosque built during the Umayyad period. Few places preserve such a visible transition between civilizations. The stones remember every chapter. Researchers have also identified workshops, storage rooms, water systems, bathhouses, and residential quarters that reveal the fortress supported far more than soldiers alone. Craftsmen worked here, officials governed here, travelers rested here, entire communities lived within its walls. Life continued long after armies departed. Another mystery surrounds the fortress's repeated reconstruction. Over the centuries, earthquakes, political change, and shifting trade routes altered its purpose again and again. Rather than abandoning the site, each new generation repaired old walls and built upon earlier foundations. Roman blocks supported Islamic buildings. Christian churches stood beneath later palaces. History accumulated layer upon layer. The surrounding landscape also played a crucial role in the fortress's survival. Seasonal streams flowing between nearby rocky ridges supplied precious water through carefully engineered reservoirs and channels, allowing people to thrive in an otherwise harsh desert environment. Without water, no fortress could survive. Without the landscape, Halabat would never have existed. Today, Qasr al-Halabat stands quietly beneath Jordan's wide desert sky. Its towers remain remarkably intact. Stone arches still frame empty doorways. Carved decorations survive despite centuries of wind and sun. Visitors often find themselves completely alone. The silence feels almost timeless. Only the desert breeze passes through rooms once filled with rulers, merchants, priests, and soldiers. Perhaps that is what makes Qasr al-Halabat so remarkable. Not simply its impressive walls, or the civilizations that transformed it over the centuries, but the realization that one isolated fortress became a meeting place for empires. The Romans built it. The Byzantines reshaped it. The Umayyads made it their own. Each left something behind. Each disappeared. Yet between two quiet desert cliffs, the ancient fortress still stands, watching, waiting, keeping the memories of every civilization that once passed through its gates. The ancient city that still hides hundreds of unexcavated buildings. On the eastern coast of Cyprus, beneath quiet farmland and scattered patches of dry grass, lies the outline of an ancient city that refuses to reveal itself completely. Stone streets emerge from the soil. Collapsed walls trace forgotten neighborhoods. Temples stand in ruins. But beyond the excavated areas, the ground remains almost untouched. Beneath these fields, hundreds of buildings still wait underground. Entire neighborhoods, workshops, homes, perhaps even palaces. A Bronze Age city remains hidden just beneath the surface. This is Enkomi, one of the greatest ancient cities Cyprus has yet to uncover. More than 3,000 years ago, Enkomi stood among the wealthiest cities in the eastern Mediterranean. Located near a natural harbor, it became a thriving center of trade where ships arrived carrying goods from Egypt, the Levant, Anatolia, mainland Greece, and lands far beyond the horizon. Copper flowed outward. Luxury goods flowed inward. The city prospered through the sea. Cyprus possessed one resource that every Bronze Age kingdom desperately needed: copper, the metal that gave the entire Bronze Age its name. Enkomi became one of the island's most important centers for processing and exporting this valuable material. Its furnaces burned day and night. Its merchants grew wealthy. Its influence spread across the Mediterranean. Archaeologists have uncovered a remarkably well-planned city unlike many of its contemporaries. Broad streets intersect at right angles. Residential districts were carefully organized. Drainage channels carried rainwater away from homes. Stone-built houses surrounded open courtyards. Urban planning here was centuries ahead of its time. Nothing appears random. Everything followed a plan. Excavations have revealed workshops where bronze was cast into tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects using techniques that required extraordinary skill. Clay molds, crucibles, metalworking tools. Even traces of ancient furnaces remain. The city was not simply trading copper. It was transforming it. Among Enkomi's most famous discoveries is the remarkable bronze statue known as the Horned God, depicting a powerful male figure wearing a horned helmet and carrying a spear. Nearby, archaeologists uncovered the famous Ingot God, another extraordinary bronze figure standing upon a copper ingot. These sculptures hint at beliefs that remain only partly understood. Religion and industry may have been closely connected. The gods themselves may have watched over the metal that made the city wealthy. Clay tablets discovered at Enkomi reveal another fascinating chapter of its history. Some were written in the Cypro-Minoan script, one of the ancient world's greatest undeciphered writing systems. Even today, no one can fully read these texts. The symbols survive. The language remains silent. An entire chapter of history waits for someone to unlock it. Around 1200 BC, as civilizations across the eastern Mediterranean entered a period of widespread collapse, Enkomi also faced dramatic change. Earthquakes may have struck. Foreign raiders may have attacked. Trade networks broke apart. The city was rebuilt several times, but it never fully recovered its former greatness. Eventually, its people moved elsewhere. The streets fell quiet. Yet Enkomi is far from fully understood. Only portions of the ancient city have been excavated. Large areas remain buried beneath modern fields, where geophysical surveys suggest countless houses, workshops, public buildings, and perhaps even undiscovered temples still lie waiting beneath the soil. Every excavation expands the map. Every trench uncovers another piece of the city. Most of Enkomi still sleeps underground. Walking through the site today, visitors see only fragments of what once stood here. Low stone walls, ancient streets, scattered foundations stretching into the distance. Beyond them, open fields continue toward the horizon. It is impossible to know where the buried city truly ends, because much of it has never been seen. Perhaps that is what makes Enkomi so extraordinary. Not simply that it was one of the Bronze Age's greatest trading cities, or that it helped supply the ancient world with copper, but that after decades of archaeological work, so much of it still remains hidden. The merchants are gone. The furnaces have grown cold. The harbor has changed. Yet beneath the fields of Cyprus, hundreds of forgotten buildings still wait, silent, patient, keeping the unfinished story of one of the Mediterranean's greatest Bronze Age cities buried just below the surface. The ancient city that was buried beneath a living forest. Deep inside the rainforests of northern Guatemala, where towering ceiba trees block the sunlight and thick vines wrap around ancient stone, an entire city vanished beneath a living forest. Its pyramids became hills. Its palaces disappeared beneath roots, its plazas filled with centuries of fallen leaves. From above, almost nothing could be seen. Nature had reclaimed every street, every temple, every wall. For nearly 1,000 years, the jungle quietly protected one of the Maya world's greatest forgotten cities. This is La Blanca, the ancient city that disappeared beneath a forest that never stopped growing. More than 1,500 years ago, La Blanca flourished in the fertile lowlands near the border of modern Guatemala and Mexico, becoming an important Maya center connected to powerful neighboring kingdoms through trade, diplomacy, and royal alliances. Merchants traveled its roads. Scribes recorded its history. Rulers governed from magnificent palaces. The city prospered beneath the tropical sky. Unlike many Maya cities dominated by towering pyramids, La Blanca became famous for something different: its enormous royal palace. Stretching across an immense platform, the palace contained elegant courtyards, ceremonial rooms, long galleries, and thick limestone walls that reflected both wealth and political authority. It was one of the largest palace complexes ever built in the Maya lowlands. The rulers lived in extraordinary surroundings. Archaeologists have uncovered beautifully carved stairways, broad plazas, residential compounds, temples, defensive walls, and finely crafted stucco decorations that once covered many of the city's buildings with brilliant colors. Today, the stone appears pale, but long ago, the city was alive with reds, blues, yellows, and white plaster gleaming beneath the sun. It must have been breathtaking. One of La Blanca's greatest treasures is its remarkable collection of ancient graffiti carved into palace walls. Unlike formal royal inscriptions, these drawings were created by ordinary people. Some depict temples, others show warriors, animals, geometric designs, and mysterious symbols. They feel surprisingly personal, almost like conversations left behind on stone. Voices from people history rarely remembers. Researchers believe the city reached its greatest importance during the late Classic Maya period, before political instability and warfare gradually weakened many kingdoms across the region. Trade declined. Royal authority faded. The population slowly disappeared. The forest began its patient return. Over the following centuries, roots pushed between limestone blocks. Trees grew through abandoned courtyards. Leaves accumulated across staircases. The jungle buried the city without destroying it. Instead, it became its guardian, protecting buildings beneath an ever-growing canopy of life. Modern archaeological surveys suggest that only part of La Blanca has been fully explored. Large sections remain concealed beneath dense vegetation, where laser mapping and continued excavation continue revealing hidden structures, residential districts, terraces, and ceremonial platforms still untouched by archaeologists. The forest has not surrendered everything. Far from it. Much of the city still sleeps beneath the trees. Walking through La Blanca today is unlike visiting an open archaeological site. Towering trees surround every ruin. Birdsong echoes through abandoned plazas. Roots weave across ancient staircases. Sunlight filters through the canopy onto stones last exposed more than 1,000 years ago. The jungle feels alive. The city feels asleep. Together, they have become inseparable. Perhaps that is what makes La Blanca so extraordinary. Not simply its impressive palace, or the remarkable graffiti left behind by its people, but the realization that nature did not erase this ancient city. It protected it. The kings disappeared. The palaces fell silent. the jungle kept growing. Yet beneath one of the world's richest living forests, an entire Maya city still waits. Hidden, patient, quietly reminding us that sometimes history is not lost beneath the earth, but beneath the roots of a forest that never forgot where the stones were. The stone fortress that protected an entire Bronze Age civilization. On a rocky hill in eastern Türkiye, overlooking the broad plains of the upper Euphrates, stands the remains of a fortress unlike any other. Its walls are broken. Its gateways have collapsed. Its towers have long since disappeared. Yet beneath the ruins, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary. Not simply another ancient citadel, but one of the earliest fortified centers ever built by human hands. A place where kings first ruled. Officials kept records. Armies were organized. And one of the world's earliest states began to take shape. This is Arslantepe, the stone fortress that helped protect an entire Bronze Age civilization. More than 5,000 years ago, long before the Hittite Empire or the kingdoms of classical antiquity, Arslantepe stood as one of the most important political centers in Anatolia. Its fertile surroundings supported farming communities that gradually grew into a powerful regional society. As villages expanded, leadership became more organized. Wealth became concentrated. Authority became permanent. The foundations of government were beginning to appear. At the heart of the settlement rose a massive citadel built upon layers of earlier occupation. Generation after generation rebuilt the same hill, creating an enormous mound that slowly climbed higher above the surrounding plain. Every new palace stood upon the remains of an older one. Every ruler inherited the work of those before. The city became a monument to its own history. Excavations have revealed an impressive palace complex with monumental mud brick architecture, broad ceremonial halls, storerooms, administrative offices, courtyards, and carefully planned entrances designed to control movement through the citadel. Nothing inside was accidental. Every room reflected authority. Every corridor directed visitors toward the center of power. This was government expressed through architecture. Among Arslantepe's most remarkable discoveries are some of the earliest known ceremonial swords ever found anywhere in the world. Crafted from arsenical copper and decorated with silver inlays, these weapons were not ordinary tools of war. They symbolized prestige, leadership, the growing power of an emerging elite. Long before iron transformed warfare, these blades represented the authority of those who ruled. Archaeologists also uncovered clay ceilings used to secure storerooms, containers, and official goods. Each seal recorded ownership and controlled the movement of valuable resources throughout the palace. This was bureaucracy in its earliest form. Officials monitored supplies. Records were kept. Administration had become part of daily life. The first governments were taking shape. One of the site's greatest surprises was the discovery of evidence for a violent conflict. Collapsed walls, burned buildings, scattered weapons, and the remains of people who died during the attack reveal that Arslantepe experienced a sudden and dramatic destruction around the end of the 4th millennium BC. The fortress did not fall quietly. It was conquered. The attackers remain unknown. Following this destruction, new groups settled the hill and constructed powerful defensive walls around the citadel, transforming Arslantepe into a true fortified center capable of protecting both its rulers and the surrounding communities. The fortress became more than a palace. It became a shield. Its stone and mud brick walls guarded one of Anatolia's earliest organized societies. Another enduring mystery surrounds the rulers who governed from Arslantepe. No complete royal lists survive. No grand inscriptions tell their stories. Yet the palace architecture, administrative ceilings, luxury goods, and ceremonial weapons all point toward a society already ruled by powerful leaders centuries before many better-known ancient kingdoms emerged. Their names disappeared. Their achievements remained. Today, visitors walking across the archaeological site see layers of history exposed one above another. Ancient walls intersect with later buildings. Protective shelters preserve fragile mud brick architecture that has survived for thousands of years. The hill appears quiet, yet beneath every layer lies another chapter waiting to be uncovered. Arslantepe continues to surprise archaeologists with each excavation season. Perhaps that is what makes Arslantepe so extraordinary. Not simply because it is one of the world's oldest fortified centers, or because it yielded some of humanity's earliest ceremonial swords, but because it preserves the moment when villages became cities, when leaders became kings, and when the first true states began to rise. The fortress still stands. The rulers are forgotten. The walls remain. Silent. Patient. Watching over the plains of Türkiye, where one of civilization's earliest chapters was written in stone. The ancient kingdom hidden inside a valley of giant tombs. In northern Sudan, beside a quiet bend of the Nile, a lonely valley is filled with towering pyramids and massive underground tombs. They are older than many people realize, larger than they first appear, and almost completely forgotten outside the world of archaeology. For centuries, shifting desert sands concealed royal chambers carved deep beneath the earth. When archaeologists descended into those tombs, they found painted walls, stone staircases, burial chambers, and the resting places of kings who once ruled an empire stretching across much of the Nile Valley. This was not Egypt. This was another kingdom. Powerful, independent, and every bit as remarkable. This is El Kuru, the royal cemetery of the ancient kingdom of Kush. Nearly 3,000 years ago, the kingdom of Kush emerged in what is now Sudan, building its power along the fertile banks of the Nile south of Egypt. Its rulers commanded thriving cities, controlled valuable trade routes linking Central Africa with the Mediterranean, and developed a civilization that blended local traditions with influences from its powerful northern neighbor. Far from being a distant frontier, Kush became one of Africa's greatest ancient kingdoms. El Kuru served as one of the earliest royal cemeteries of the Kushite kings. Generation after generation, rulers chose this sacred valley as the place where they would begin their journey into eternity. Each burial added another monument to the landscape. The valley slowly became a city of the dead, a place reserved for royalty alone. Unlike many Egyptian tombs, the royal burials at El Kuru were constructed beneath steep pyramids connected to underground chambers by long stone staircases descending deep into the bedrock. Visitors first entered through the pyramid, then descended below the desert, into silence, into darkness, into the world prepared for kings. Excavations have uncovered beautifully decorated burial chambers covered with colorful paintings showing gods, sacred rituals, protective symbols, and scenes of the afterlife inspired by both Kushite and Egyptian religious traditions. Despite the passing of centuries, many of the colors remain remarkably vivid. Blues, reds, yellows. The walls still tell their stories. Among the most famous tombs belongs to King Tantamani, one of the last Kushite pharaohs who ruled both Nubia and Egypt during the 25th dynasty. His burial chamber contains magnificent painted scenes that rank among the finest surviving works of ancient Nubian art. The kings of Kush did not simply imitate Egypt. They created a royal tradition of their own. Archaeologists have also discovered horse burials surrounding several royal tombs. Dozens of carefully buried horses were laid to rest with elaborate harnesses and ceremonial equipment, reflecting the extraordinary importance of cavalry to Kushite kings. Few ancient civilizations honored horses in this way. The animals accompanied their rulers into the next world, faithful even after death. One enduring mystery surrounds the earliest rulers buried at El Kuru. Some of their names survive. Others have disappeared forever. The sequence of the first Kushite kings remains incomplete, leaving archaeologists to reconstruct an ancient dynasty from damaged inscriptions, monuments, and the silent evidence preserved beneath the sand. The valley remembers. History still searches. Although dozens of royal tombs have already been excavated, researchers believe many surrounding structures, subsidiary burials, and ceremonial areas remain only partially explored. Modern surveys continue revealing hidden features beneath the desert surface. Every excavation uncovers another fragment of a kingdom that once rivaled Egypt itself. The story is still unfolding. Today, El Kuru lies peacefully beside the Nile, surrounded by desert hills and scattered pyramids rising against the Sudanese sky. Few tourists reach this remarkable place. The valley remains quiet, its underground chambers cool and still. Only the wind moves between the ancient monuments where kings have rested for nearly 3,000 years. Perhaps that is what makes El Kuru so extraordinary. Not simply its pyramids, or its beautifully painted royal tombs, but the reminder that one of Africa's greatest ancient kingdoms has too often remained in the shadow of its northern neighbor. The kings are gone. The horses no longer race across the desert. The empire has faded into history. Yet beneath the sands of Sudan, the valley of the royal tombs still waits. Silent, patient, guarding the forgotten legacy of a kingdom that once ruled the Nile. The palace that changed everything we knew about the Bronze Age Aegean. On the northern coast of Crete, beneath centuries of collapsed stone and wind-blown earth, archaeologists uncovered the ruins of a palace that rewrote the history of the ancient Aegean. Its courtyards stretched farther than anyone expected. Its workshops were filled with evidence of remarkable craftsmanship. Its storerooms held the wealth of an entire kingdom. And hidden within its walls were clues proving that Europe's first great civilization was far more advanced than historians had once believed. This was not a simple royal residence. It was the heart of a powerful Bronze Age world. This is the Palace of Malea, the discovery that transformed our understanding of the Minoan civilization. Nearly 4,000 years ago, the island of Crete became home to one of the most sophisticated civilizations in the ancient Mediterranean, long before classical Greece, long before the Roman Empire. The Minoans built monumental palaces, mastered maritime trade, developed writing, and created an economy that connected distant shores across the sea. Among their greatest centers stood Malea. Located close to the northern coastline, the palace occupied a strategic position between fertile farmland and busy maritime trade routes. Ships arrived carrying copper from Cyprus, ivory from Africa, precious stones from the Near East, and luxury goods from Egypt. Everything passed through the palace. Merchants negotiated here. Officials kept records. Artisans transformed imported materials into extraordinary works of craftsmanship. Unlike a fortress designed for war, Malea functioned as the administrative, economic, and ceremonial heart of an entire kingdom. Its enormous central courtyard was surrounded by storerooms, workshops, ceremonial halls, kitchens, staircases, shrines, and residential quarters arranged with remarkable precision. Every section had a purpose. Every corridor led somewhere important. The palace operated like a living machine. Excavations revealed hundreds of massive clay storage jars, known as pithoi, capable of holding thousands of liters of olive oil, grain, wine, and other valuable supplies. These storerooms demonstrate that the palace controlled enormous quantities of food and resources. This was more than a royal household. It was an economic center managing the wealth of an entire region. One of Malea's most celebrated discoveries is a magnificent gold pendant depicting two bees facing one another while holding a drop of honey between them. The craftsmanship is astonishing. Tiny gold spheres decorate its surface. Delicate wires form elegant patterns. The pendant remains one of the finest masterpieces of Minoan jewelry ever discovered. Its maker possessed extraordinary skill. Archaeologists also uncovered stone ceilings, bronze tools, ceremonial vessels, finely painted pottery, religious figurines, and evidence of sophisticated workshops where metalworkers, potters, and craftsmen produced luxury goods for both local rulers and international trade. The palace never stood idle. Every room tells the story of work, organization, innovation, prosperity. Around 1700 BC, disaster struck. A powerful earthquake destroyed much of the original palace. Yet instead of abandoning the site, the Minoans rebuilt it on an even grander scale. Larger halls, improved storage areas, more elaborate architecture. The destruction became an opportunity to create something even greater. Another mystery still surrounds Malea's final decline. Sometime around 1450 BC, the palace suffered another devastating destruction. Whether caused by invasion, internal conflict, natural disaster, or a combination of events remains uncertain. Unlike many later civilizations, the Minoans left no clear explanation. The ruins preserve the ending, not the reason. Modern excavations continue revealing new sections of the palace complex and the surrounding town, suggesting that much of ancient Malea still lies beneath the earth. Residential neighborhoods, workshops, roads, religious buildings. Every excavation season adds another piece to the puzzle of one of Europe's earliest urban societies. The city still has stories to tell. Walking through Malea today, visitors follow ancient stone pathways beneath the bright Cretan sun. The central courtyard remains open to the sky. Massive storage jars still stand where they were left. The palace feels peaceful now. Yet nearly 4,000 years ago, these same halls echoed with merchants, craftsmen, priests, and rulers directing one of the Mediterranean's greatest Bronze Age civilizations. Perhaps that is what makes the Palace of Malea so extraordinary, not simply its impressive architecture, or its beautiful gold treasures, but the realization that long before the rise of Athens or Rome, an advanced civilization had already mastered trade, engineering, administration, and artistry on this small island in the Aegean Sea. The rulers are gone. The workshops are silent. The palace stands in ruins. Yet beneath the stones of Crete, Malia still reminds us that some of history's greatest civilizations were already flourishing, while much of Europe was only beginning its journey into the Bronze Age. The forgotten capital built beside a sacred volcano. High in the Peruvian Andes, where snow-covered mountains meet windswept valleys, the ruins of an ancient city stand in the shadow of a towering volcano. Its walls still stretch across the hillside. Its enormous temple still rises toward the sky. Its storehouses remain lined along ancient roads. Everything suggests this was once a place of immense importance. Yet today, few people remember its name. For centuries, it was one of the most sacred places in the Inca world, a city built beside a mountain they believed possessed divine power. This is Raqchi, the forgotten capital where an empire honored the creator god beneath the watchful presence of a sacred volcano. More than 500 years ago, the Inca Empire stretched across thousands of kilometers, linking mountains, deserts, forests, and coastlines into the largest civilization ever to exist in the Americas. Roads crossed impossible landscapes. Messengers traveled day and night. Cities rose across the Andes. Among them, Raqchi occupied a place unlike any other. According to Inca tradition, this was the place where the creator god Viracocha revealed his power. Ancient stories tell of a mysterious traveler who calmed a raging volcano and brought peace to frightened communities before continuing his journey across the Andes. Whether legend or history, the story transformed Raqchi into one of the empire's holiest destinations. Pilgrims came from distant provinces. The city became sacred ground. At the center of the settlement stood the magnificent temple of Viracocha, one of the largest buildings ever constructed by the Incas. Its enormous central wall, built from finely shaped volcanic stone rising above massive stone foundations, once supported an immense roof that towered over the surrounding valley. Even in ruins, the scale is breathtaking. Nothing else in the Inca world was quite like it. Surrounding the temple, archaeologists uncovered long rows of circular storehouses known as kulkas, carefully arranged across the hillside. These buildings held maize, dried potatoes, textiles, weapons, and supplies collected from across the empire. The city was not only a religious center, it was also an important administrative and logistical hub serving travelers along the famous Inca Road. Excavations have revealed carefully planned streets, residential quarters, ceremonial plazas, defensive walls, workshops, and sophisticated water channels that carried fresh mountain water throughout the settlement. Every stone reflects careful engineering. Every structure fits naturally into the landscape. The city seems almost to grow from the mountains themselves. One of Raqchi's greatest mysteries is the unusual design of the Temple of Viracocha. Its towering central wall has no exact parallel elsewhere in Inca architecture. Researchers continue debating how the enormous roof was supported and why the builders chose such an unconventional design. The answers remain uncertain. The stones keep their silence. Another remarkable feature is the city's location beside the dormant volcano Quinzicata. Many archaeologists believe the surrounding mountains held deep spiritual significance for the Inca, who regarded prominent peaks as sacred beings known as apus. The volcano was more than scenery. It was part of the city's identity, a guardian watching over every ceremony. Following the arrival of the Spanish in the 16th century, Raqchi gradually lost its religious importance. The temple fell into ruin. The roofs disappeared. The roads grew quiet. Yet unlike many ancient cities, much of its stonework remained standing, protected by the dry mountain climate, and the respect local communities continued to show the site. Today, visitors walking through Raqchi can still follow the same ancient streets once used by Inca pilgrims, priests, and royal officials. The great temple wall rises against the Andean sky. Rows of circular storehouses stretch across the hillside, and beyond them, the sacred volcano still dominates the horizon exactly as it did centuries ago. Time has changed the city. The mountains have not. Perhaps that is what makes Raqchi so extraordinary. Not simply its monumental temple, or its remarkable engineering, but the realization that an entire sacred city was built where faith, politics, and nature came together beneath the shadow of a living mountain. The priests are gone. The ceremonies have ended. The empire has vanished. Yet beside the sacred volcano of the Andes, Raqchi still waits, silent, patient, guarding the memory of a forgotten capital where the gods were once believed to walk among stone walls. The fortress built above a sea of desert cliffs, high above the rugged canyons of southern Jordan, where endless cliffs fall away into deep desert valleys, an ancient fortress crowns the summit of a lonely mountain. From its walls, the land stretches for miles in every direction. Steep ravines protect its flanks. Towering cliffs guard its approaches. It feels almost impossible to reach. Yet for centuries, kings, crusaders, merchants, and armies all fought to control this remarkable stronghold. Because whoever held this mountain controlled the roads below. This is Shobak Castle, the forgotten fortress that watched over a sea of desert cliffs. Long before the castle appeared on the skyline, the region formed part of one of the most important trade corridors in the Middle East. Caravans carrying spices, incense, silk, and precious metals crossed these valleys on their way between Arabia, Egypt, Syria, and the Mediterranean. Every traveler passed beneath the surrounding mountains. The location was too valuable to ignore. Sooner or later, someone would build a fortress here. That moment came in AD 1115, when Baldwin I, king of Jerusalem, ordered the construction of a mighty crusader castle on the mountain. Known originally as Montreal, meaning Royal Mountain, the fortress became one of the earliest crusader strongholds established east of the Jordan River. Its purpose was clear: protect the kingdom, control the trade routes, watch the desert. Built from massive limestone blocks, Shobak was surrounded by thick defensive walls, powerful towers, deep ditches, hidden passageways, and heavily fortified gates designed to withstand long sieges. Every entrance forced attackers into narrow approaches. Every wall overlooked steep cliffs. Nature itself became part of the fortress. The mountain fought beside its defenders. Excavations have uncovered chapels, residential quarters, kitchens, bakeries, stables, workshops, storerooms, and an extraordinary water system that allowed hundreds of people to survive even during prolonged blockades. Life inside the fortress was carefully planned. Nothing depended on the outside world. The castle could endure when everything around it could not. One of Shobak's most remarkable features is a secret staircase carved directly into the rock. Descending hundreds of steps through the mountainside, it led defenders to a hidden spring far below the fortress. Even when surrounded by enemies, the castle still had access to fresh water. It was an engineering masterpiece disguised as a lifeline. For decades, Shobak stood at the frontier between Crusader and Muslim territories. Its garrison constantly watched the surrounding desert, knowing that armies could appear with little warning. The fortress became a symbol of both strength and vulnerability, powerful enough to dominate the landscape, yet isolated enough to stand alone. In 1189, after the fall of Jerusalem, the fortress finally surrendered to the forces of Sultan Saladin following a long siege. Rather than destroying the castle, the new rulers strengthened it, adding Islamic architectural features while preserving much of the earlier Crusader structure. The mountain changed masters. The fortress remained, stone by stone. Generation after generation, archaeologists continue discovering traces of every civilization that occupied Shobak: Crusader inscriptions, Islamic carvings, ceramic workshops, defensive tunnels, ancient cisterns. Each layer reveals another chapter in the castle's remarkable history. No single culture defines the site. It belongs to all who rebuilt it. Standing atop the fortress today, visitors are greeted by one of the most spectacular views in Jordan. Endless cliffs ripple across the desert like waves frozen in stone. Deep valleys disappear into the horizon. The silence is broken only by the wind moving through ancient archways. It becomes easy to understand why this mountain was chosen. Few places offer such command over the landscape. Perhaps that is what makes Shobak Castle so extraordinary. Not simply its towering walls, or its dramatic history of siege and conquest, but the realization that one lonely mountain became the meeting point of kingdoms, religions, and civilizations. The soldiers have gone. The banners have fallen. The caravans no longer pass below. Yet above the endless sea of desert cliffs, Shobak still stands, silent, patient, watching the ancient roads just as it has for more than 900 years. The ancient city where a 4,000-year-old palace still sleeps underground. Across the wide plains of northeastern Syria, an enormous mound rises quietly above the surrounding farmland. From a distance, it looks like an ordinary hill. Nothing about it suggests that beneath its surface lies one of the greatest buried cities of the ancient Near East. Palaces, temples, streets, storehouses, homes. Most of them have never seen daylight for 4,000 years. And somewhere beneath those layers of earth, an ancient royal palace still waits, almost completely untouched. This is Leilan, the forgotten city where an entire Bronze Age kingdom still sleeps beneath the ground. Nearly 4,000 years ago, Tel Leilan stood at the heart of Upper Mesopotamia, in a region that linked the great civilizations of Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the Levant. Caravans crossed its plains. Kings sought to control it. Merchants filled its markets. Its fertile fields produced grain on a scale that helped feed entire kingdoms. The city became one of the wealthiest centers in northern Mesopotamia. Known in antiquity as Shekna, and later renamed Shubat Enlil by the powerful king Shamshi-Adad, the city became the royal capital of one of the most influential kingdoms of the early 2nd millennium BC. From here, rulers governed vast territories stretching across modern Syria and Iraq. Orders left the palace. Taxes arrived. Diplomats entered its gates. The kingdom was managed from this very hill. Excavations have revealed massive defensive walls, broad streets, administrative buildings, workshops, temples, residential districts, and evidence of one of the largest planned urban centers of its time. The city was carefully organized. Neighborhoods followed a plan. Public spaces connected important buildings. This was not a settlement that grew by accident. It was designed. Among the site's most remarkable discoveries is the immense royal palace, a sprawling administrative complex built around courtyards, audience halls, storerooms, archives, and private royal apartments. Only portions of the palace have been excavated. Much of it still lies beneath the mound. Room after room remains sealed beneath thousands of years of accumulated earth. The palace is not lost. It is simply waiting. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of clay ceilings, administrative records, pottery, tools, and imported luxury goods that reveal Tel Leilan's importance as both a political capital and an international trading center. Goods arrived from distant kingdoms. Officials recorded every transaction. The palace functioned like the beating heart of an organized state. Every corridor once echoed with activity. One of Tel Leilan's greatest contributions to archaeology came from evidence of a sudden environmental crisis. Researchers discovered a thick layer of wind-blown dust covering parts of the city, suggesting that a prolonged drought may have struck northern Mesopotamia around 2200 BC. Fields failed. Harvests collapsed. Communities were abandoned. Some scholars believe this climate event contributed to the wider collapse of several ancient civilizations across the Near East. The earth itself may have changed history. Yet the city did not disappear forever. Centuries later, new rulers rebuilt Tel Leilan, transforming it once again into a thriving royal capital. Old walls supported new buildings. Earlier streets remained beneath later neighborhoods. Each generation built upon the last. The mound continued to grow. History buried itself layer by layer. Even today, only a small portion of Tel Leilan has been excavated. Modern surveys indicate that vast sections of the ancient city remain untouched beneath the surface. Entire residential quarters, administrative buildings, workshops, temples, and large portions of the royal palace still sleep beneath the soil, preserved by thousands of years of silence. The city has revealed only a fraction of its story. Walking across Tel Leilan today, visitors see little more than a broad earthen mound rising above the Syrian plain. There are no towering monuments visible from afar, no standing palace walls, only quiet ground beneath an open sky. Yet beneath every step lies another room, another street, another forgotten chapter of one of Mesopotamia's greatest cities. Perhaps that is what makes Tel Leilan so extraordinary, not simply that it once served as a royal capital, or that it preserves evidence of one of history's earliest climate disasters, but that beneath its quiet surface, an entire Bronze Age city still survives. The kings are gone. The scribes have fallen silent. The palace doors remain closed, waiting, patiently, for the day when the ancient city beneath the hill finally wakes once more. The forgotten capital that flourished before the Hittites. In the rolling hills of central Türkiye, a low mound rises quietly above the surrounding fields. At first, it looks unremarkable, just another hill among many. But beneath its surface lies the story of a kingdom that flourished centuries before the Hittite Empire became one of the great powers of the ancient world. Massive stone gateways, royal tombs overflowing with gold, temples, palaces, fortification walls built with astonishing skill. Everything suggests this was once the capital of a forgotten civilization. This is Alacahöyük, the ancient city that was already thriving long before the Hittites wrote their first history. More than 4,000 years ago, central Anatolia was home to prosperous kingdoms whose names have largely vanished from history. These communities traded with Mesopotamia, mastered metalworking, and built impressive ceremonial centers long before the rise of the great empires that would later dominate the region. Among the most important of them stood Alacahöyük, a city whose influence reached far beyond its walls. The settlement occupied a strategic position overlooking fertile plains and important trade routes connecting Anatolia with northern Syria and Mesopotamia. Caravans carrying copper, tin, silver, textiles, and luxury goods passed nearby. Merchants brought wealth. Craftsmen transformed raw materials into extraordinary works of art. The city prospered. Archaeologists have uncovered monumental fortification walls, carefully planned streets, temples, administrative buildings, workshops, and one of the earliest examples of sophisticated urban planning in Anatolia. The city was designed to impress. Massive stone foundations supported mud brick buildings above. Wide gateways controlled entry. Every structure reflected careful organization. Among Alacahöyük's most astonishing discoveries are the famous royal tombs dating to the early Bronze Age. Inside these graves, archaeologists uncovered magnificent treasures unlike anything previously found in Anatolia. Gold jewelry, silver vessels, bronze weapons, finely crafted ornaments, and extraordinary ceremonial standards made from bronze and precious metals. The wealth buried here revealed a society far more advanced than anyone had imagined. The mysterious bronze standards remain one of the site's greatest puzzles. Decorated with bulls, deer, birds, sun discs, and intricate geometric designs, they may have been carried during religious ceremonies or displayed as sacred symbols of royal authority. No ancient text explains their purpose. Even today, scholars continue debating exactly what they represented. Their meaning remains hidden. Centuries later, during the Hittite period, Alacahöyük became an important provincial center within one of the greatest empires of the Bronze Age. New temples were built. Monumental gateways were decorated with impressive stone reliefs showing kings, priests, musicians, animals, and sacred ceremonies. Rather than abandoning the old city, the Hittites expanded it. The past became the foundation for a new civilization. One of the most remarkable features of Alacahöyük is the famous Sphinx Gate. Massive carved sphinxes stand beside the entrance, while long relief panels depict royal processions, sacrificial rituals, musicians playing instruments, and ceremonial gatherings. These sculptures offer one of the clearest surviving windows into Hittite religious life. The stones still tell their stories. Despite more than a century of excavation, large portions of Alacahöyük remain unexplored. Modern archaeological surveys suggest that additional residential districts, workshops, defensive structures, and administrative buildings still lie buried beneath the mound. Each excavation season uncovers another chapter. Much of the ancient capital still waits beneath the earth. Walking through Alacahöyük today, visitors pass towering stone gateways, ancient walls, and reconstructed sections of the city's defenses. The surrounding countryside feels peaceful. Only birds break the silence. Yet beneath every step lie thousands of years of history, preserved beneath layers built by countless generations. The city never truly disappeared. It simply became buried beneath its own past. Perhaps that is what makes Alacahöyük so extraordinary. Not simply its magnificent royal tombs, or its famous stone sphinxes, but the realization that a powerful kingdom flourished here centuries before the Hittites became masters of Anatolia. The kings are forgotten. The ceremonies have ended. The gates remain open. Yet beneath the hills of central Türkiye, the ancient capital still waits, silent, patient, keeping alive the memory of one of Anatolia's earliest great civilizations, the desert kingdom where stone lions guarded the tombs. Deep within the arid valleys of northwestern Saudi Arabia, surrounded by towering sandstone cliffs and endless stretches of desert, lie the remains of a forgotten kingdom that once controlled one of the richest trade routes in Arabia. Its markets welcomed caravans from distant lands. Its rulers grew wealthy from incense, spices, and precious goods crossing the desert. Its temples echoed with ancient ceremonies. And high upon the cliffs, stone lions watched silently over the tombs of the dead. Even after more than 2,000 years, they still remain. This is Dadan, the desert kingdom where carved lions became eternal guardians of an ancient civilization. Long before the rise of the Nabateans at Petra or the expansion of the Roman Empire into Arabia, Dadan flourished as the capital of two powerful kingdoms. the Dadanite kingdom and, later, the Leilanite kingdom. Located in the fertile oasis of Alula, the city occupied one of the most strategic locations in northwestern Arabia. Water flowed through the valley. Palm groves covered the landscape. Caravans found shelter here before continuing their long journeys across the desert. For centuries, merchants traveling between southern Arabia, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Mediterranean passed through Dadan carrying frankincense, myrrh, spices, ivory, precious metals, and luxury goods. The city prospered from trade. Its rulers taxed the caravans. Its markets expanded. Its influence spread across the Arabian Peninsula. The desert became a highway of wealth. Archaeological excavations have uncovered temples, administrative buildings, residential districts, irrigation systems, inscriptions carved into stone, workshops, and evidence of a highly organized urban settlement. Unlike many desert communities, Dadan was not simply a stop along the caravan route. It was a thriving political and religious capital, a city built to endure. One of Dadan's most remarkable features lies high above the valley floor. Dozens of monumental tombs were carved directly into the sandstone cliffs, their entrances cut with astonishing precision. Many of these burial chambers remain unfinished. Others preserve elegant architectural details despite centuries of erosion. But what makes several of these tombs truly unique are the magnificent stone lions carved beside their entrances, silent guardians overlooking the valley below. Archaeologists believe the lions symbolize strength, royal authority, and divine protection. Positioned beside elite tombs, they may have served as sacred protectors for powerful families or important rulers. The carvings are unlike anything else found elsewhere in ancient Arabia. Their exact religious meaning, however, remains uncertain. The lions reveal nothing. They simply watch. Hundreds of inscriptions discovered throughout Dadan have provided valuable clues about the kingdom's rulers, language, religion, and administration. Written in the ancient Dadanitic script, these texts mention kings, priests, offerings, taxes, and religious ceremonies. Each inscription offers only a fragment of the larger story. Together, they reveal a sophisticated society whose history had nearly disappeared from memory. Religion played a central role in life at Dadan. Temples dedicated to local deities stood at the heart of the city, where priests performed rituals connected to fertility, trade, and royal authority. Pilgrims likely visited from neighboring regions, bringing offerings to the gods who were believed to protect both the oasis and the caravan routes. The desert was harsh. Faith offered certainty. Despite its wealth and influence, Dadan eventually declined as political power shifted and trade routes changed. New kingdoms rose. Others faded away. The bustling markets became quiet. The temples fell into ruin. Wind slowly carried sand across abandoned streets. Yet the cliffs continued to protect the city's greatest monuments. The lions never left their posts. Today, archaeologists continue uncovering new sections of Dadan through ongoing excavations around Alula. Residential neighborhoods remain buried beneath layers of sand. Additional temples, workshops, public buildings, and inscriptions are still emerging from the desert floor. Much of the ancient capital has yet to be explored. The kingdom continues to reveal its secrets one discovery at a time. Perhaps that is what makes Dadan so extraordinary. Not simply its thriving oasis, or its powerful rulers who controlled the caravan roads of Arabia, but the realization that an entire desert kingdom entrusted its dead to guardians carved from living stone. The merchants have vanished. The kingdoms have fallen. The temples have grown silent. Yet high upon the sandstone cliffs, the lions of Dadan still stand. Silent, patient, watching over a forgotten kingdom that once ruled the crossroads of the Arabian desert. The royal city hidden along the upper Euphrates. For thousands of years, the Euphrates River carried more than water. It carried merchants, armies, kings, ideas, entire civilizations. Along one of its most strategic crossings stood a city so important that nearly every great empire of the ancient Near East fought to possess it. Today, little remains above the surface. Broken walls, scattered stones, silent earth. But beneath them lies the royal city that once stood at the crossroads of empires, a capital where Hittite kings ruled, diplomats negotiated, and armies prepared for war. This is Carchemish, the forgotten royal city hidden along the upper Euphrates. Carchemish occupied a commanding position overlooking one of the most important river crossings in the ancient world. Situated near the modern border between Türkiye and Syria, the city connected Anatolia with Mesopotamia and the Levant. Whoever controlled Carchemish controlled trade, communication, and military movement across a vast region. Its location alone made it priceless. The settlement was already thriving during the early Bronze Age, but it reached its greatest importance during the late Bronze Age as one of the leading cities of the Hittite Empire. Royal governors ruled from its palaces. Administrators managed surrounding territories. Merchants filled its warehouses. The city became one of the empire's most powerful provincial capitals. In many ways, it was a kingdom within a kingdom. When the Hittite Empire collapsed around 1200 BC, many great cities disappeared forever. Carchemish did not. Instead, it survived. Local rulers transformed it into the capital of one of the Neo-Hittite kingdoms that emerged from the ruins of the old empire. While neighboring kingdoms vanished, Carchemish continued to flourish for centuries. Its royal traditions endured long after the empire itself had fallen. Archaeological excavations have uncovered massive defensive walls, monumental gateways, royal palaces, ceremonial courtyards, temples, workshops, and broad paved streets that reveal an exceptionally well-planned city. Every section reflected careful organization. Fortifications protected the outer city. Administrative buildings occupied the center. Religious monuments stood beside royal residences. Power and faith shared the same landscape. Among Carchemish's greatest treasures are its extraordinary stone reliefs. Large basalt slabs once lined gateways, staircases, and palace entrances, carved with remarkable scenes of kings, warriors, priests, musicians, mythological creatures, hunting expeditions, and sacred ceremonies. These sculptures preserve vivid details of Neo-Hittite life that have survived for nearly 3,000 years. The stones still speak. One of the city's most impressive monuments is the Herald's Wall, decorated with finely carved reliefs showing royal processions, ceremonial figures, and symbolic animals. Nearby, the famous Water Gate overlooked the Euphrates, serving both as a practical entrance to the river and as an architectural statement of royal authority. Every visitor arriving by water encountered the city's power before entering its streets. Carchemish also played a decisive role in one of history's most famous battles. In 605 BC, the armies of Babylon, led by Crown Prince Nebuchadnezzar, defeated the forces of Egypt near the city in the Battle of Carchemish. The victory reshaped the balance of power across the ancient Near East. Empires rose, others declined. The city stood at the center of events that changed history. Modern archaeology has revealed layer upon layer of occupation beneath the site. Hittite palaces were built over earlier settlements. Neo-Hittite rulers expanded older monuments. Assyrian influences appeared in later construction. Each generation left its mark while preserving pieces of the past beneath new foundations. The city became a history book written in stone. Although more than a century of excavation has uncovered remarkable monuments, vast portions of Carchemish remain unexplored. Residential neighborhoods, workshops, administrative archives, and sections of the royal palace still lie beneath the earth. Advances in archaeological surveying continue to identify structures hidden below the surface without disturbing them. Much of the city still sleeps beneath its own history. Perhaps that is what makes Carchemish so extraordinary. Not simply that it survived the fall of an empire, or that it witnessed one of the ancient world's defining battles, but that for centuries it remained the beating heart of kingdoms that refused to disappear. The kings have long since departed. The armies no longer march across the Euphrates. The palace halls have fallen silent. Yet beneath the quiet soil beside the river, the royal city of Carchemish still waits. Silent, patient, guarding the memory of an empire that once ruled the crossroads of the ancient world.